The lie that money lasts. Every empire believed its money would outlive its wars. Every government swore its paper was different, stronger, smarter, safer, and every generation trusted it until it failed. What if I told you that every major currency in history has collapsed? The Byzantine solidus, once the world's most stable coin. The French assignat, the Spanish real, the Qing dynasty tael, the Confederate dollar, the German mark, the Venezuelan bolivar, all of them born with confidence, buried in inflation. We don't think of money as fragile. It feels permanent, like gravity, always there, holding the economy together. But history shows something else. Every monetary system is temporary. It begins in trust, grows in power, and ends in panic. And when that happens, what survives isn't paper or promises, it's people, skills, and assets that can't be printed away. Our story begins with gold, the oldest form of trust. For nearly 1,000 years, the Byzantine Empire's solidus was a miracle of stability. Minted in nearly pure gold, it carried the empire's seal and reputation across continents. Traders in the Middle East, Europe, and Africa trusted it more than their own rulers' coins. The solidus became the dollar of its time. But the temptation to cheat the system is as old as power itself. As wars drained the treasury and emperors grew desperate, the solidus was slowly shaved, clipped, and diluted. By the 11th century, its gold content had fallen so far that merchants refused it. The coin that once anchored a civilization had lost its soul, and with it, the empire's credibility. That's the first pattern of collapse. Debasement begins invisibly. Governments don't destroy trust overnight. They erode it, coin by coin, note by note, spreadsheet by spreadsheet. Fast forward 700 years, and Europe was repeating the same mistake. Only this time, the fraud wasn't in metal, but in paper. And it would end with revolution. Paper promises, and the price of revolution. France, 1789. A nation drowning in debt. The king's wars, the nobility's luxuries, and years of bad harvests had left the country bankrupt. So when revolution came, the new leaders faced an old question. How do you fund freedom without gold? Their answer was paper-backed. Not by metal, but by land. The assignat, they called it. Each note represented confiscated church property, supposedly as good as gold. At first, it worked. Markets revived, taxes flowed, optimism returned. But the illusion didn't last. The government printed more notes to cover expenses, then more to fund the army, then more to feed the people. Within 5 years, prices had exploded more than 100-fold. A loaf of bread that cost 1 assignat now cost thousands. Ordinary citizens traded their notes for candles, food, or anything that would hold value. The revolutionaries had replaced one tyranny, the monarchy, with another, inflation. And yet, even as their currency burned, France didn't vanish. People adapted, farmers bartered crops, craftsmen demanded payment in silver. Foreign merchants insisted on hard coin. In the ruins of financial trust, real production and real skill became the new money. This same pattern echoed across history. When formal systems break, informal ones rise. When the French assignat died, the economy didn't stop, it changed shape. That's what always survives collapse. Activity, ingenuity, and trade, even without the old currency. The lesson: when money fails, value doesn't disappear, it migrates. It moves into things the government can't fabricate: land, labor, knowledge, and trust. By the 19th century, a new world power had learned this lesson. But in trying to control it, America would make the same mistake that had haunted every empire before, believing that confidence can be printed. The greenback experiment and the age of illusions, the United States, tears itself apart. The Civil War is more than a battle of armies. It's a battle of economies. The North is rich, but cash-starved. The South has cotton, but no credit. Both sides turn to the same weapon: paper money. The Union prints greenbacks, unbacked notes issued to fund the war effort. They promise nothing but faith in the government. And to everyone's surprise, it works for a while. Factories boom, soldiers are paid, and victory feels affordable. But when peace returns, reality sets in. Prices have doubled, gold is scarce, and public trust is eroding. The greenbacks that once symbolized patriotism now symbolize debt. The U.S. learns the painful truth of every emergency currency. Once you start printing to survive, it's almost impossible to stop. The South fared even worse. The Confederate dollar collapsed completely, losing 99% of its value before the war ended. Soldiers were paid in paper worth less than the envelope it came in. Shopkeepers used the notes as wallpaper. Across oceans and centuries, the pattern is identical. A crisis arrives. Paper promises multiply. Confidence evaporates. And the survivors aren't the ones holding the most money, but those holding the least debt and the most tangible assets. The same story repeated in Germany after World War I. The Weimar mark became worth less than the paper it was printed on. People hauled wheelbarrows of cash for bread. Banknotes were burned for warmth. But the nation that emerged from that collapse, disciplined, industrial, and determined, rebuilt faster than anyone thought possible. Why? Because skills survived. The factories were still there. The workers still knew how to produce. The land still grew food. It wasn't money that rebuilt Germany, it was human capital. And that's a pattern we're repeating again, only this time on a global scale. The global web of debt, the 20th century, promised stability. The US dollar, backed by gold, became the anchor of the world. After World War II, the Bretton Woods system tied currencies to the dollar and the dollar to gold. For the first time in history, nations agreed to trust not metal, but an idea that the American economy would never break faith. Then came Vietnam, oil shocks, and inflation. By 1971, Nixon ended the gold standard, turning the dollar into a pure fiat currency. The link between paper and metal, between promise and proof, was gone. And yet the world kept trusting it, because the dollar was backed by the most powerful economy and military on earth. But power doesn't stop debt. By the 1980s, nations borrowed against tomorrow to pay for today. Developing economies took massive loans denominated in dollars. When interest rates rose, the system cracked. The Asian financial crisis of 1997 showed how fragile globalization could be. Thailand, Indonesia, and South Korea watched their currencies implode overnight. Millions lost savings, businesses vanished, governments fell. The root cause wasn't greed or corruption alone, it was dependence on borrowed money. Nations had built prosperity on debt, not production. In 2008, it happened again. Only this time the debt wasn't in developing nations, it was in the world's richest. Banks collapsed. Markets froze, and governments intervened with trillions of new dollars, euros, and yen. The printing presses roared again, now digital, faster, infinite. And yet, people survived. Businesses adapted. Investors moved into assets that couldn't be inflated away. Real estate, commodities, and eventually, decentralized digital stores of value. The lesson echoed once more. Money fails when trust fails, and trust fails when systems forget that debt is not wealth. Today, the global debt stands at more than $300 trillion, 3 times the size of the world economy. Every empire believed it could manage its obligations. Every empire believed it was different, and every empire believed the laws of economics didn't apply to it. History says otherwise. What survives the next collapse? So what survives when money fails? Not the currency, not the bonds, not the promises made in boardrooms or parliaments. What survives are the constants: skills, production, assets, and liquidity. Throughout history, collapses have favored the adaptable, those who could work, repair, grow, or trade. When Rome's coinage fell, blacksmiths and farmers survived. When France's assignats died, those with land endured. When Germany's mark collapsed, engineers rebuilt. When Argentina's peso failed, people turned to the dollar, then to barter, then to creativity. Real wealth is always transferable, tangible, and functional. It's not a number, it's a capacity. Look around today. Digital money moves at light speed, yet the same fragilities remain. Governments still print to cover deficits. Banks still lend more than they hold. Households still borrow to sustain lifestyles. We're told that technology has made us safer, that AI, central banks, and digital systems can manage complexity better than ever before. But complexity isn't control. It's just leverage with better branding. The next collapse, whenever it comes, will likely be faster, quieter, and more interconnected than any before it. But the lessons won't change. When trust in paper fades, trust in people becomes priceless. So, what survives when money fails? Skills, because you can't default on what you can do. Production, because real output feeds nations. Assets because something real always beats something promised. Liquidity because adaptability is the new stability. Every era believes its money will last. Every generation thinks it's immune to history. But those who study the past don't predict collapse. They prepare for resilience. The story of money is the story of trust. And trust, like any currency, must be earned, not printed. If you found this story meaningful, share it. Because understanding the past isn't about fear, it's about freedom. The kind of freedom that survives when money doesn't.